Guns are everywhere.
You're saying?
You literally cannot escape guns, whether it's in movies, TV shows, video games, comics, music. Guns are everywhere. We've become so desensitized to guns that they mean almost nothing when they present themselves in most mediums of art. I cannot think of many shows or films short of those meant for children that don't include guns in one way or another at some point. And even a few shows like Regular Show, aimed at older kids and younger teens, do have a couple episodes with guns. This even includes soap operas and shows like Grey's Anatomy, a fucking hospital show. It's come down to, if you need drama but can't write it, bring a gun into the mix. Except the issue with that is that guns have become so normal to audiences that even those don't have nearly the same weight as they should anymore.
Real quick, I hope you have no political input in this video about guns. I'm talking about guns in artistic mediums, not real life. Yes, there's a relation, just have effect on each other, but this is not what this video is about, and you can lose your stranger a little bit. Thanks.
If you have ever watched Japanese shows or films, you'll probably notice any violence is either done with hand-to-hand combat or weapons such as knives, swords, or random shit like crowbars and pipes. This is because guns are so illegal in Japan, even the police don't carry them. On top of that, it's an island, so getting one isn't very easy, like crossing over a border, so when a gun does present itself, there's so much more intensity behind it because that means you know it's serious business. Well, in the US, that's not the case, and even in many UK and Australian shows and films where there are guns aplenty. I know the UK is pretty particular about guns. I have no clue about Australia, but their video games are pretty censored, so I assume they don't really like them either. There's an over-reliance on guns that writers just toss one in and it's supposed to make intensity where really there isn't any. Shows especially do this now that everyone have hour-long episodes and 12 episodes a season, just pulling the narrative and the story plot so thin. It's a topic for another video, but I'm so sick of seeing guns in every show just masking over the fact that the writers don't know what else to do. Now this is different for video games to an extent, as there needs to be gameplay involved, not just a narrative. Now that doesn't stop every game developer, but the game needs to be fun, and if it's a shooter and that's your main mechanic, it would be a very boring and poorly received game if there was very little shooting in your shooter. But there is an issue in games called narrative dissonance, which means that the gameplay narrative and the story narrative exist in two very different worlds. A great recent example of this is The Last of Us 2. There's a part of the game where the story makes it apparent that Ellie has killed many of Abby's friends in an attempt to get revenge, but in doing so forgets about the mounds of body that Ellie just leaves behind on the journey to get there, so it's very hard to take any of it seriously given the gameplay deaths compared to the story deaths. Now almost every game has this issue to an extent, like wearing an outfit different than the default, but then that outfit doesn't appear in the cutscenes. They're small, inconsequential for the most part, and we can kind of just brush past them sometimes, and sometimes we don't even notice them, but it's those big ones that really make the difference on how well an audience will react and feel about a game's story. And that's not even touching on the subject of skins, emotes, how guns are a part of the style, and what I like to call video game fashion involved in games like Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, Valorant, and so on. This also, of course, goes into the whole microtransaction issue that's been ongoing for the better half of a decade and not relevant to what we're talking about here. But when it comes to more traditional mediums, I want to see writers use guns to emphasize the severity of a situation, giving it more weight to an already dire or intense situation, rather than it just being another prop. You can have action films without always using guns. Look at the filmography of Jackie Chan. Guns are present in use throughout, but the action is mainly hand-to-hand and melee combat, giving the guns that do appear much more weight and danger than if Jackie just ran around shooting everything and all the bad guys had handguns. Now you can see the juxtaposition when you look at his American films such as Rush Hour. As funny as these are, they have more gun action than Chan's Chinese films because it's shot in Hollywood and geared towards an American audience. The same goes for Shanghai Noon and Shanghai Nights as well. And I don't think guns are bad or should go away in art. In fact, most of my favorite games, movies, books, comics have guns, and guns have their place. I'm absolutely one for cathartic releases, but there needs to be a change as to how they're used and why they are used. I love me a nice shootout as much as the next 20-something-year-old video game nerd, but I don't always want them in everything I consume. It just becomes boring and repetitive over time. Alright guys, well thank you so much for watching. Kind of a different format I wanted to try out. If you liked what you see, definitely go check out the channel, hit subscribe, hit like, it really helps out a lot. Comment if you want to see me cover or talk about anything specific. But until next time, thank you so much and have a good one.